Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler here live in the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. A story that a lot of people have been following around the world has to do with the cruise ship where right now passengers are quarantined on it because of an exposure of the hantavirus. However, there are some people who have died already from this, and there are potentially some passengers who got off of the cruise ship before before they discovered the hantavirus, who could possibly have had that are out there right now. There's some in the States, and we've heard that officials are monitoring that situation. We want to find out more, though, just about what hantavirus is and what's been transpiring. To do so, we need an expert, and that's why we have Dr. Messer here from Oregon Health Sciences University joining us. And Doctor, thank you for being here and to help us walk through this. And I think, to start off, I'd just like to turn to you and ask, could you give us an explanation of what hantavirus is and really, from your standpoint, what's transpired here so far?
Yeah, so happy to be here and talk about this a little bit. So hantavirus is really a group of viruses. There are about 20 of them that are known to infect humans, and they're thought of primarily as an environmental virus. They live in nature in rodent populations, rats or mouse populations, and typically don't spill over into humans. But humans, when they're exposed, usually to mouse droppings or dust that's got mouse urine on it, can be infected and get sick and develop disease. And in this particular cruise case, though, a lot of the details are still being worked out. But the working theory is that at least one individual, perhaps two, while the ship was in Argentina, were exposed to this virus while they were off the ship, and then came onto the ship and then developed illness later on. But probably an environmental acquisition to start this whole thing.
So you were somewhere where they got exposed to one of those things that you just mentioned in association with rodents. Is there something particular about Argentina or South America, that area of the world, where this is more prevalent?
It occurs all over the world. I couldn't tell you exactly on how many continents. It's in North America. It's in South America. It will occur in Europe and Asia too. I think that the common feature is you've got to have rodents. You've got to have rodents living in a natural setting, and so that can be anywhere typically. That's rural, often agriculture, because rodents are drawn to particularly seed crops or seed storage. So it will be a setting that brings the rodents together in large enough numbers and where people also go, that typically lead to people getting infected with the virus. Each region of the world that has a hantavirus kind of has its own strain, and Argentina and this particular region has a strain called Andes virus, and that is the particular local association with what has shown up on the ship. It is a virus that is known to be present in that part of Argentina and not typically in other parts of the world.
When you talk about an environmental disease, so they caught it that way, how does it work as far as the human-to-human transaction and as far as being able to spread it to other humans?
Yeah, so Andes virus is the only hantavirus that has got well-documented evidence of human-to-human transmission. And the outbreaks that have been studied all point to people being in close contact, big social gatherings, somebody in that gathering being sick, coughing a lot, and spreading the virus probably through either droplets from them coughing or actually aerosolized virus particles while they're coughing to people who are close to them. And so that's the way that the virus makes it into other humans once it's gotten into one human. And as I said, Andes virus is the only of the hantaviruses so far that's really demonstrated this capacity, but it is there's solid evidence that this virus has been transmitted human to human in the past.
And we have I believe you mentioned it was 2 individuals who have died so far. And
I think there are 3 who've died in the current outbreak. Yeah,
3 who have died in the current outbreak. And when we're talking about that, as far as these 3 that have died, how likely is it? Do you think? I mean, I guess that's kind of hard to speculate, but what are the possibilities that somebody could have gotten off of that cruise ship before they discovered that this was going on and departed, and then perhaps went back home and
Yeah.
potentially exposed people?
Yeah, it's really hard to say because the likelihood of it making into other people really, I think, based on what we know about past outbreaks, is that people have to have been pretty close together and in intimate, not intimate contact, but close contact. So if any of the people who got off the ship were in close contact with any of the sick people while they were sick and coughing, there is a reason to be realistically concerned that they may have picked up that virus. The incubation period can be quite long. It's usually anywhere from a week to 4 or even 5 or 6 weeks. And so these people are going to have to quarantine for a while in order to, rule out or find out that they in fact picked up the infection. But it would take this combination of two things. But it is not an unrealistic concern that some of these people who got off the ship before it went into quarantine could also have it. The last big outbreak that was investigated down in Argentina found that before transmission precautions were put in place in that outbreak, there were about 2 cases that came from each previous infected person. So one infected person passed it on average to 2 other people if those other people were in close contact with them. Now, when they imposed essentially precautions to isolate people after it was discovered that that was what was the outbreak, it fairly quickly went away. So as soon as you get people to separate and take precautions, there doesn't appear to be much of a risk of transmission afterwards. But because of that long incubation period, people have to not get sick and go around other people for quite a while.
Yeah, how long was that incubation period again, just to reiterate?
So sort of generically, it's somewhere between 6 and 42 days.
Wow, yeah, that is a long time. Um, and when somebody does contract it, what are the symptoms like? Like, is it? I guess, yeah. Can you walk us through, what it actually does to the body?
Yeah, it's a very familiar story. You start with a flu-like illness, you get fever, you get headache, your body starts to ache. Sometimes you get diarrhea and gastrointestinal complaints. But the severe disease goes pretty quickly to the lungs. People they start to cough, they get respiratory they become distressed. It gets hard to breathe. That's often how they'll initially present, and the disease goes through a fairly short but severe critical period where you can become septic, experience shock, organ failure, and it can be fatal in those cases. But if you can support people through that critical period, they usually start to recover afterwards. The fatality rate is, depending on which of those many viruses makes you sick, anywhere from about 5% to maybe 40 or 50%. And this particular virus falls in that roughly 40%, maybe 50% range.
Wow, that seems like a very high fatality rate.
It is a high fatality rate, yes.
What happens next year? Now that they've got I guess the cruise ship is isolated in theory. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But you have these people out there. Do they know where they are, and do you monitor them? Do you quarantine them?
Yeah, because this is being monitored mostly by the WHO and by European countries, we're sort of getting information from them. But those countries are engaged in fairly intense contact tracing, so identifying these people who got off the boat, got onto airplanes, flew on airplanes, who is sitting next to them, identifying those people and having them quarantined. And so that's actively going on in several countries, including in the US. I know there are a couple of US passengers, more than a couple, I think a total of 17 US passengers I might have read. And there are some people quarantined. Obviously, they're quarantining, and then some contacts in the US from airplane flights are also quarantining. And that is, the best way to contain this.
Yeah, so I guess it just goes from there. And yeah, as far as what the next steps are, is that kind of it? Just contact trace and then quarantine?
Yeah, yes, I think so in this case. We're otherwise talking about a virus that we already know existed, recognized. There doesn't appear to be anything special about the circumstances that led to the initial infections, although that hasn't been fully investigated as far as I know. But the major objectives, I think, at this point, from a public health point of view, is to identify everyone who may be at risk, have them isolate through a quarantine period, make sure that they're not ill. If they become ill, treat them, and the odds very much favor this coming to an end as people exit those quarantine periods or become sick, but become sick while they're quarantined, so they're not able to transmit it to anybody else.
Well, this is a lot of information. I really appreciate you being able to share all that with us and let us know more about this. Anything else that you think is important for the general public to know?
Um, uh, I think it's easy to kind of have a little bit of a tremor or a response to this in the context of our collective experience with COVID. There are a lot of things about this that are, I think, different and really merit it being treated as an outbreak that it is, and not imagine that it is something other than an outbreak that we've in fact seen outbreaks of Andes virus before in populations. There are some risk factors that are new here. The air travel with people who were potentially exposed just underlines how quickly these things can spread. But I think we're looking in this case at a virus that doesn't have the same sort of potential as both SARS coronaviruses and other respiratory viruses like influenza to spread from person to person once we see what's going on and people can be isolated and go through a quarantine period.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time in explaining this. I think you're right. There's a collective, remembrance of what we went through with the pandemic with COVID. And so it's naturally people are nervous when they hear something like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you're very welcome. Always happy to help.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right.
And for everybody watching, we are live here in the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. We're going to take a break. We'll come back here and we've got more for you at 3 o'clock. We're going to be joined by Senator Ron Wyden to talk about the Portland fire. And we've got plenty more here for you throughout the afternoon, but back here just a few after this.